The ER didn't believe it was just a joke. That's the line my family kept repeating while I stood there with frosting in my hair and blood on my hands. At my graduation dinner in Madison, my sister Sloane smiled for the cameras, then shoved my face into the graduation cake so hard my teeth struck something solid beneath the icing. I went backward, cracked my head on the chair, and hit the floor bleeding as people laughed and filmed. The next morning, the doctor studied my scan without blinking, then called in a safety team. He leaned closer and said, "This didn't start last night." The restaurant was the kind of place families chose when they wanted to look proud without trying too hard. Warm lighting, polished wood, servers moving like they were trained to ignore awkward moments. Our group took over a long table near the center close enough that strangers could glance over and recognize the mood celebration. Nearly 30 people were there. Relatives I hadn't seen in years, a couple of friends from school, even one professor who'd watched me drag myself through late-night classes while I worked 2 jobs to afford them. Everyone kept congratulating my parents like they'd earned the degree by association. I'd told myself that night would be different. I was 36, finally finishing what I started, and I wanted one evening where I didn't have to shrink to make anyone comfortable. My dress was simple but flattering. My hair curled just enough to look effortless, and for once I let myself feel pretty without hearing a voice in my head accuse me of being vain. When the graduation cake arrived, it looked ridiculous in the best way, tall, perfectly frosted gold lettering spelling my name. People clapped. My mother, Evelyn, dabbed at her eyes like it was opening night on Broadway. My father, Frank, lifted his glass for a toast that somehow became a story about sacrifice, mostly his. And then there was my sister Sloane. Sloane was older by just over a year, close enough in age that people assumed we grew up as a pair. But she never felt like my equal. She felt like my shadow with sharper edges. In public, she could be dazzling. She hugged harder than anyone, laughed louder than anyone, said all the right things at exactly the right volume, the kind of charisma that made strangers call her magnetic, the kind that left bruises when it snapped into place. That night, she slid into the spotlight like she owned it. She looped her arm through mine, pressing her cheek near my hair like we were best friends. I could smell sparkling wine on her breath. Her smile was bright enough to fool the whole room. Then she leaned in close and whispered soft and sweet, "Relax. Smile. It's your night." The cameras came up before the cake knife did, phones hovering like tiny stage lights. Someone called out for a picture. My mother angled herself toward the best side of her face. My father straightened his shoulders. I stood there with my hands clasped, waiting for the moment to pass. Sloane's hand slid to the back of my head. For one split second, I thought she was adjusting my hair for the photo. That's how practiced she was making harm feel like help, right up until it wasn't. Then she shoved. Not a playful push. Not the messy, joking smear you see in harmless videos. A hard slam forward that drove my face straight into the cake. Frosting exploded up my nose and over my lips. My teeth hit something solid under the icing with a sickening crack. Pain bloomed so fast I couldn't even form a sound. I stumbled backward blinded, choking on sugar and panic. My chair tipped. The edge of it caught my head on the way down, and then the floor did the rest. The room tilted, then went bright, then loud. I tasted copper. When I lifted my hand to my face, it came away red, and the sound that cut through everything was laughter. Sloane's first clean and sharp, and then others joining in like they were relieved it was funny. Someone said, "Oh my God," in the tone people use when they want to be entertained. Another voice rushed in right on cue like a command everyone knew by heart. It was just a joke. The phrase moved faster than help ever did. I didn't remember anyone kneeling beside me to ask if I could see straight. I remembered napkins. I remembered my mother's hand waving like she was shooing away an inconvenience. I remembered my father's low voice near my ear, not worried, just annoyed. "Don't make a scene." And I remembered Sloane brushing frosting off her dress like she'd spilled a drink, already telling the story for laughs. You should have seen her face. My name is Lily, and for most of my life I've been praised for being easy. Easy to ignore, easy to blame. Easy to patch up with a smile so nobody else had to feel uncomfortable. So when the server finally asked if I needed help, my mother answered for me. "She's fine. Just clumsy." And I did what I always did. I nodded. I laughed the smallest laugh I could force through swelling lips. I apologized for bleeding. I don't even remember walking out. I remember sitting in my car with the interior light too bright, staring at my reflection like it belonged to someone who'd made a mistake by showing up. Frosting had dried along my hairline. My cheekbone was already turning dark. My head felt heavy and wrong, like it wasn't seated correctly on my neck. When I started to drive, Madison looked familiar in the way a dream looks familiar. Streets sliding past while my stomach rolled. At every red light, I tried to rewrite what happened into something I could survive. Maybe she didn't mean to push that hard. Maybe I leaned at the wrong second. Maybe I was tired, oversensitive, dramatic. Those explanations came fast because they'd been rehearsed for years. The one thing I couldn't rewrite was the flash I'd seen on Sloane's face right after I hit the floor. Not surprise, not fear. Satisfaction quick as a camera shutter before she put her mask back on. At home, the silence felt like pressure. I washed frosting out of my hair slowly, carefully, like I could scrub the night clean if I took enough time. When I turned my head too fast, pain speared behind my right ear, and nausea rose like a wave. I told myself to sleep it off. Sleep didn't come. It broke apart. Each time I drifted, I snapped awake with my heart racing, mouth tasting metal. At some point, my phone buzzed. A tag notification. Sloane had posted a short clip with a caption that made it sound cute, harmless, like a blooper. Comments rolled in from people who weren't there, laughing at my face, pressed into cake. I stared at the screen, then turned it face down like that could stop the humiliation from spreading. By morning, the room wouldn't stay still. Light felt sharp. My thoughts felt delayed, like my brain was wading through water. And under the dizziness, something older started stirring. Not a clear memory, yet more like the shape of one. The same sick drop in my stomach I'd felt in other accidents I'd never questioned out loud. I tried to stand, and the floor tilted so hard I grabbed the dresser. That was the moment my body stopped negotiating. I reached for my keys, and I drove myself to the ER before I could talk myself out of it. The ER was bright in a way that made my skull feel exposed. Fluorescent light hummed overhead. The air smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. I gave my name at the desk, kept my voice steady, and said I hit my head last night. I did not say why. Not yet. Saying it out loud felt like lighting a match in a room full of gas. In the exam room, a nurse asked questions with a calm that made my chest ache. When did it happen? Did you lose consciousness? Are you nauseated? Any changes in vision? I tried to answer like a competent adult, but the truth kept slipping through in details I could not control. The way the room spun when I sat up. The way light hurt. The way I tasted metal, even after I rinsed my mouth. When Dr. Hart came in, he did not rush. He pulled up a stool so he was level with me, not towering over the bed. He listened without the impatient smile I'd learned to expect whenever I admitted pain. He checked my pupils, had me follow his finger, tested my balance. When I swayed, his expression changed. Not panic, just focus. "Tell me exactly how you fell," he said. I hesitated. My throat tightened. My sister was joking, I started, and even to me it sounded like a defense I did not believe. She pushed my face into my graduation cake, and I fell back. He did not laugh. He did not soften it into something cute. He nodded once, as if filing it away, then asked, "Did you hit the floor or the chair first?" "The chair," I said. Then the floor. I was bleeding. Dr. Hart's gaze stayed steady. "That's not a joke," he said quietly. "That's blunt force. I'm ordering a CT scan. We need to be sure you don't have a fracture or bleeding inside." The word fracture made my stomach flip. As they wheeled me down the hallway, the ceiling lights passed in bright rectangles. The scanner was cold and loud. I lay still, breathing through nausea, trying not to picture Sloane's hands on the back of my head, trying not to picture the room laughing. Back in the exam room, time stretched. I watched the curtain move when people walked by. I counted my breaths. My phone buzzed once, then again. I left it face down. When Dr. Hart returned, he held a tablet and wore the kind of careful expression that makes your body understand bad news before your mind does. He closed the curtain fully and sat down closer than before. "Lily," he said, and my pulse jumped. "You have a small fracture near the base of your skull. It explains the dizziness and nausea. You're lucky you came in." I stared at him numb. from last night. Yes, he said. Then he swiped to another image and paused. And there's something else. This area shows signs of an older injury that healed. I can't tell you the exact timing, but it's not new. The room went very still. My thoughts collided. The shape of those old memories suddenly had edges. Dr. Hart watched my face and spoke gently but firmly. When I see a current head injury and signs it wasn't the first time, I'm required to bring in our safety team. Not to accuse anyone, to make sure you're safe before you leave. A minute later, a woman in plain clothes stepped in and introduced herself as the hospital's safety advocate. She pulled her chair to my side, lowered her voice, and asked a question so simple it felt like a door opening. Do you feel safe going home today? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time, I looked. It was my mother. Where are you? What did you tell them? I didn't answer her right away. My hand was shaking, but the safety advocate's question stayed louder than my mother's texts. Do you feel safe going home today? I swallowed. No, I said. I don't. She nodded like that was allowed. Then we planned for safety first. Has anyone ever pressured you not to get medical care after you were hurt? The old reflex surged. Deny. Smooth it over. But the scan was still on the screen. Yes, I admitted. My sister. And my mom. They said I was overreacting. A knock sounded. Dr. Hart stepped in. Your family is here, he said. They're demanding to see you. My stomach clenched. The advocate's voice stayed calm. They don't come in unless you want them to, she said. You're the patient. You're in control. Outside the curtain, I heard my mother first. This is ridiculous. She bruises if you look at her wrong. My father murmured, soft and useless. Then Sloane's laugh, bright and brittle, like she still thought this was content. The nurse opened the curtain and they pushed in anyway. My mother's eyes snapped to the advocate. Who are you? She demanded. Why are you talking to my daughter? I'm here for Lily, the advocate said, to make sure she leaves safely. My mother turned to me, voice dropping into that familiar sweetness. What did you tell them? She hissed. Fix it. Tell them it was just a joke. You're going to ruin your sister's life over a cake. Sloane stepped closer, palms up, performing concern. I'm sorry you fell, she said, but you know you're sensitive. Don't do this. My father stared at the floor. Let's go home, he said. We'll talk. You don't need strangers involved. The rage hit hot, then cooled into something clean. They weren't scared I was injured. They were scared the story had left their control. I looked at the scan again and felt the older mark on the image like a weight in my chest. No, I said. My mother blinked. Excuse me. No, I repeated. It was not a joke. I was bleeding and you told me to smile. Sloane's face tightened. You're being dramatic. The advocate shifted one step between us. We're continuing this outside, she told them. Lily will decide who speaks with her and when. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. The first time she had no line that worked. As they were guided out, Sloane stared at me with fury she couldn't hide. I didn't look away. I'm done covering for you, I said. The moment they were gone, the room felt like it could finally breathe. The safety advocate didn't push me into huge decisions. She asked practical questions that sounded small but changed everything. Who had keys to my place? Who could pick me up without alerting my family? Where could I stay if my sister decided to talk? Dr. Hart returned with my discharge plan and a tone that made my mother's performance seem childish. You are not driving, he said. You need rest and someone needs to check on you. Then he added, we're documenting your injuries thoroughly. He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a promise. Hospital security walked us through a quieter corridor so I wouldn't have to pass my family in the waiting area. The advocate explained my options in plain language. If I wanted, I could give an initial statement to create a record. Not to start a war. To protect myself if the story tried to rewrite itself again. I pictured Sloane laughing while my head rang. I nodded. I want it documented, I said. The officer asked me to describe the dinner in order. I kept it factual. My sister put her hand on the back of my head. She shoved my face into the cake. I fell backward. I hit the chair, then the floor. I bled. People said it was a joke. My mother told me not to ruin the night. Saying it out loud made it impossible to minimize. The next day, the advocate called to check on me and told me to save what I could. A screenshot of Sloane's post, messages from my mother demanding I fix it. They weren't proof of force, but they were proof of pressure. 2 days later, Detective Park met me in a quiet interview room. He didn't ask why I didn't fight back. He asked what I needed to feel safe. When he mentioned the scan showing signs of older injury, I didn't retreat into excuses. I told him about other accidents I could remember, the ones that always happened when Sloane was close enough to touch me and everyone else was distracted. Then my Aunt Jo called. We weren't close, but her voice was unsteady. "I need to tell you something before you talk yourself out of this," she said. She met me later that week at a coffee shop. Her hands trembled around her cup. "I saw Sloane shove you once when you were younger," she said. "Not hard enough for anyone to make a fuss, but hard enough that you slammed into the counter." And she smiled right after. Just for a second, that admission changed the shape of everything. Detective Park requested the restaurant's camera footage. When he told me they had it, my stomach dropped. It wasn't dramatic. It was ordinary and undeniable. Sloane's hand on my head, the force, the pause before she performed concern. Within days, a temporary no-contact order was issued. Reading it felt like air returning to my lungs. Sloane could not call or text. She could not come to my home or my work. My mother tried to pull me back with long messages about loyalty and forgiveness. I didn't argue. I forwarded what mattered and blocked her number. A month later, the case moved forward. I didn't need a big courtroom scene to feel justice. I needed distance that held. The first night I realized I'd gone hours without bracing for my sister's shadow, I understood what safety really was. Not a mood, a boundary enforced.
14 months later, Lily lived in a different city in a small apartment that felt quiet in a way her childhood home never did. The fracture healed. The headaches faded. What never returned was the reflex to apologize for being hurt. Sloane remained on the other side of a no-contact order, and for Lily, that distance was not cruelty. It was oxygen. Here's what I can't stop thinking about: the worst injury wasn't the cake or the fall. It was the way everyone tried to rename it, to shrink it, to make Lily responsible for their comfort. Watching her stop negotiating with a lie was the real turning point. She stopped arguing, stopped explaining. Closure didn't arrive as a dramatic speech. It arrived as consistency. She no longer stayed where harm was treated like humor. Now I want to ask you, if you were in that room, what would you have done when someone said it was just a joke? What lesson do you take from Lily's choice, and what boundary would you set first?